My parents chose to take my sister on vacation instead of me. But later, she ended up ruining the entire trip and even got arrested. Now, at last, my parents see her for who she truly is. Don't miss this truly unique opportunity to be at the origins of the great channel by subscribing to it. I'm 23, and my younger sister, Lena, is 18. If there were ever a person who embodied pure evil, I believe it would be her. For years, I tried to open my parents' eyes to the truth, but they refused to listen, until now. To give some background, my relationship with my parents has always been rocky, and a huge part of that is because of Lena. They absolutely idolized her, and I never stood a chance. My mother had suffered a miscarriage before Lena was born, which devastated her. So when Lena finally came into the world a few years later, they saw her as nothing short of a miracle, a child who mended the wound left by their loss. From that moment on, she became the sun around which our entire family revolved. Now, don't get me wrong, I loved my sister when we were kids. But over time, I started to notice something no one else seemed to see. Lena was an expert manipulator. She had a way of twisting reality to suit her needs, effortlessly painting herself as the victim whenever it benefited her. One memory that stands out was on my birthday. Our grandparents gifted me a beautiful antique pocket watch, a family heirloom that meant a lot to me. I was thrilled, but Lena? She was visibly envious. She kept pestering me to let her borrow it, but I refused. It was mine, after all. She even tried to get our parents to intervene, but since the watch came from our grandparents, they couldn't really do anything about it. That night, Lena got her revenge in the cruelest way. She knew I was terrified of spiders, so she carefully placed one inside my pillowcase, ensuring that I'd find it the moment I climbed into bed. I woke up in sheer terror, feeling something crawling on me, and screamed loud enough to bring my parents running. Lena, ever the actress, pretended to be just as shocked as they were. But later, when we were alone, she smirked and admitted to me, without a shred of guilt, that she had done it on purpose. "Maybe now you'll learn to share," she whispered with an eerie grin. Another time, I had a crush on a boy in my class named Matt. I was so excited when I finally got up the courage to invite him over to watch a movie. I spent ages picking out the perfect outfit, hoping to impress him. But the moment he arrived, Lena, accidentally, spilled an entire glass of juice all over me and laughed like it was the funniest thing in the world. I had to rush upstairs to change, humiliated beyond words. And she didn't stop there. She spent the entire evening making sure I couldn't enjoy a single second with Matt. She shared the most embarrassing childhood stories about me, constantly inserting herself into our conversation, and refused to leave us alone. Just as Matt was about to leave, Lena flashed a smug smile and told him, "You know, you could do way better than her." Matt looked visibly uncomfortable the entire time and left in a hurry. I was stunned by how ruthless and calculating Lena could be. Over the years, I repeatedly told my parents about her behavior, but they always dismissed it, insisting she was just young and immature. No matter what I said, they refused to acknowledge who she really was. Instead, they saw me as the one stirring up trouble. Eventually, I gave up trying to make them see the truth. Lena remained their golden child, while I was always the outsider. Determined to build a life away from the toxic dynamic at home, I threw myself into my studies and earned a spot at a great college. Moving out was the best thing that could have happened to me. But every time I came back home for breaks, Lena made it painfully clear that she hated having me there. She ignored me completely, refusing to even acknowledge my presence. At family dinners, she would go out of her way to sit far from me and constantly interrupted whenever I spoke. It was as if my mere existence irritated her, and she made sure I knew it. She even messed with my belongings, always pretending she just needed to borrow something, only for it to mysteriously end up broken or lost. And when I complained, my parents brushed it off, telling me to get along with her. After a while, I stopped coming home during breaks. Instead, I made excuses to stay with friends and their families. My parents barely seemed to care, assuming I was just an independent young adult enjoying my freedom. Meanwhile, Lena graduated high school but didn't have the grades to get into a university. She ended up enrolling in a community college and, as a result, never had to move out of our parents' house. As for me, I moved to San Francisco and landed a job at a multinational corporation, a job I actually love. I keep in touch with my parents from time to time, but visits back home are rare. As for Lena, I've completely cut her out of my life. Now, here's where things take a turn. Recently, my father suffered a near-fatal heart attack. By some miracle, he survived and was rushed to the hospital. When my mother called to tell me what had happened, I didn't hesitate. I booked the earliest flight home. The doctors prescribed a strict regimen of medications and strongly advised him to adopt a healthier lifestyle. Since being discharged, my father has been reflecting a lot on life. He told me that the experience made him realize how precious time with family truly is. I understood where he was coming from, so I spent a few days at home, working remotely since my job allowed it. It wasn't an issue, but I quickly noticed that Lena was visibly irritated by my presence. I did my best to steer clear of her. We were adults now, and after our dad's heart attack, I had no interest in getting into pointless arguments. One morning over breakfast, my father suggested that we take a family vacation together. It had been years since we'd gone anywhere as a family, and he wanted to make the most of this second chance at life. At first, I was hesitant, but I could see how much it meant to him, so I agreed. Lena, on the other hand, looked less than thrilled, but since the plan had already been set in motion, she had no choice but to go along with it. My father took care of booking the flights and accommodations, and I made sure to request time off from work. I even informed my colleagues that I wouldn't be available. I genuinely wanted to focus on spending time with my parents. But when we arrived at the airport, I discovered something shocking. My ticket had been cancelled. I turned to my father confused. He was just as bewildered, swearing up and down that he had booked and paid for my ticket along with everyone else's. As we checked with the airline, the truth became clear. Out of the 4 tickets, mine was the only one that had been mysteriously cancelled. Then I glanced at Lena. She stood there with a sly smile, the same smug, triumphant look I had seen countless times before, the look she always wore after successfully pulling off one of her little games. And in that moment I knew. She had done this. She had probably accessed my father's computer and cancelled my ticket on purpose, just to make sure I wouldn't be able to go. Furious, I turned to her, demanding an explanation, but she just stood there, silently enjoying the chaos she had created. I pointed straight at her and told my parents that this was no accident. Lena had done it deliberately because she never wanted me on this trip in the first place. But, as always, my mother immediately brushed it off. "Lena would never do something like that," she said, exasperated. "You need to stop being jealous of your sister." My father, though a little more measured, still tried to justify it. "Maybe it was just a mix-up with the airline," he suggested. "You shouldn't assume the worst." I was beyond frustrated. No matter what Lena did, they always refused to see the truth. Their precious, miracle child could never be at fault. At that point, there was nothing I could do. My ticket was already cancelled, and there were no available flights for the rest of the day. Technically, I could have rebooked for the next day, but the idea of returning home, sorting out new travel plans, and then flying alone, just to join a trip that had already been soured, didn't appeal to me. Besides, I was supposed to be sharing a room with Lena. And if she was capable of cancelling my flight just to keep me from coming, I dreaded to think what else she might have planned. I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that Lena had more tricks up her sleeve, ready to make my life miserable if I had managed to go on that trip. My father, initially hesitant, even suggested that they could cancel the vacation and reschedule it for another time. But then, after a moment's thought, he started talking about how long it had been since he'd had a proper getaway. My mother chimed in, reminding me that I traveled frequently for work anyway. Missing this trip wouldn't be a big deal for me. Their words stung more than I expected. It almost felt like they were waiting for me to insist that they continue without me, as if they wanted an excuse to go on this vacation without any guilt. So, I gave them exactly what they wanted. "If you still want to go, you should," I told them. And without hesitation, they agreed. I didn't argue. I didn't fight. But deep down, it hurt. Not because I was desperate to go, but because it was painfully obvious that they had no problem leaving me behind. The idea of a family vacation without me didn't seem to bother them at all. So there I stood, alone at the airport, watching as my parents and Lena happily moved forward with their trip. I had no intention of going back to my childhood home, not after everything that had happened, so I booked a flight straight back to San Francisco. I told myself I wouldn't dwell on it. I had already taken time off work, so I decided to make the most of it. Instead of sulking, I reconnected with old friends, spent my days reading, and turned my break into a peaceful solo retreat. Every now and then, my parents would video call me from their vacation, and I could see how much fun they were having. It was obvious that my absence hadn't changed anything. They laughed, they explored, they soaked in the scenery, all without me. I told myself I didn't care. I had already missed out, and there was no use wasting my time thinking about it. But deep down, I couldn't ignore the familiar feeling of being excluded. This was just another example of the favoritism that had always existed in our family. Still, I clung to the hope that, one day, they would finally see Lena for who she really was. And to my complete surprise, that day finally came. A few days into their vacation, I woke up to several missed calls from my mother. My heart immediately dropped. My first thought was that something had happened to my father. Maybe his health had taken a sudden turn for the worse. I called her back instantly. When she answered, she sounded completely shaken. "Is Dad okay?" I asked, my voice tight with panic. Yes, he's fine," she assured me, but there was no relief in her voice, just pure distress. "But something terrible has happened." She took a deep breath before explaining. For the past few days, my parents had noticed something alarming. My father's heart medication was vanishing. Little by little, pills were going missing from his supply. At first, they assumed it was some sort of mix-up, but as the days passed, it became impossible to ignore. They were in a foreign country, unfamiliar with the healthcare system there, and replacing those crucial medications wasn't going to be easy. Panic started to set in. My father couldn't afford to miss a single dose. Desperate to find the missing pills, my mother searched their entire hotel room, but they were nowhere to be found. Then, by chance, she went into Lena's room. She had just needed to borrow some sunscreen while Lena was out. That was when she saw it. Tucked away inside Lena's bedside table were all the missing pills. It was a chilling revelation. My mother, still shaken, immediately called for my father. He rushed into Lena's room and saw it for himself, his missing heart medication, carefully tucked away in her bedside table. That was the moment everything changed. For years, they had worshipped Lena as their miracle child, turning a blind eye to her manipulations. But now, standing there in a foreign hotel room, staring at undeniable proof that she had been deliberately putting my father's health at risk, the illusion shattered. For the first time, they saw Lena for who she really was. My mother's voice trembled as she asked me if they should confront Lena right away. "Not yet," I told her firmly. "Not until you're back home." Lena was an expert manipulator. If they confronted her now, she would twist the situation in her favor, spinning some elaborate excuse, playing the victim, gaslighting them until they questioned their own judgment. No, they needed time to process this, to gather their emotions, to prepare themselves for the inevitable confrontation. But it seemed like fate had other plans. Later that night, I received a frantic call from my father. His voice was shaking. "Lena is in jail." I nearly dropped my phone. "What?" He explained that despite my advice, they had confronted Lena about the missing medication. And, as expected, she completely lost it. She flew into a rage, hurling insults, throwing objects, her anger focused mainly on my father. She accused him of betraying her by booking a ticket for me in the first place, claiming that I had no right to be part of their family vacation. Then, with a venomous glare, she warned them that if they continued to have a relationship with me, she would teach them a lesson they'd never forget. My parents were stunned. The argument escalated until hotel staff got involved. Someone, probably a guest who heard the commotion, called the authorities. When the police arrived, Lena refused to calm down. Instead, she turned her fury on them, hurling insults and refusing to cooperate. That was the final straw. They arrested her on the spot. Now, she was sitting in a jail cell, and my parents had no choice but to wait 24 hours for her release. But the nightmare wasn't over. Desperate to get home as soon as Lena was released, my parents went to reschedule their flight, only to discover that their passports and wallets were missing. Lena had either hidden them or thrown them away, leaving my parents stranded in a foreign country with no money, no identification, and no way out. For the first time in their lives, they were experiencing the consequences of Lena's manipulations firsthand. My mother, who had spent years defending her, excusing her behavior, refusing to believe a single word I said, was now on the phone with me, sobbing. "I don't know what to do," she admitted, her voice small and broken. "We have nothing. We have no way home. Please, can you help us?" I could hear the shock in her voice, the realization that the daughter she had always protected wasn't an innocent victim, but the one causing all the pain. "I'll send you money through Western Union," I assured her. "But you need to find your passports first." I was certain Lena hadn't destroyed them. This was her game. She wanted control. She wanted my parents to beg. But what she didn't realize was that she had already lost. For the first time in their lives, my parents saw me, the daughter they had ignored, dismissed, and cast aside, as the one they could truly rely on. And for the first time, they were truly sorry. Even after everything, I still wired them the money. Maybe it was out of obligation, maybe it was because I wanted them to finally open their eyes, or maybe, deep down, I still hoped for a shred of real love from them. Either way, I helped them, despite knowing that just a few days ago, they had so easily left me behind. They apologized. They admitted they were wrong. But a part of me couldn't let go of the years of favoritism, of being ignored, of being treated like an afterthought while Lena was worshipped. How could I just forgive them now, when the only reason they were coming to me was because they had no one else left? Still, I listened as they updated me on their situation each day, their voices laced with stress and exhaustion. Lena was released from jail the next day, and my parents immediately confronted her. They gave her a choice: hand over their passports, or they would involve the authorities again. Cornered, Lena finally gave in and revealed where she had hidden them. With their documents back in hand, my parents wasted no time booking the next flight home. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. The moment they stepped through the front door, they told Lena it was time for her to leave. They had reached their breaking point. For years they had ignored every red flag, every warning sign. But now, they could no longer pretend. They had seen firsthand what she was capable of, and my father, still recovering from a heart attack, couldn't afford to live under constant stress, wondering if Lena would try to sabotage his health again. And yet, Lena refused to go quietly. What started as an argument quickly erupted into a full-blown screaming match. She threw accusation after accusation at them, her voice shrill with rage. She didn't just deny her actions, she twisted the entire narrative, blaming them for everything. "You never loved me enough," she screamed. "I was always fighting for your attention. I gave up everything for you, and you still chose her. You should have left her out of this family." She wasn't remorseful. She wasn't sorry. She was furious that they were finally treating me like I mattered. And then she made the ultimate threat. "If you make me leave, I'll tell everyone that you abused me." The words hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Lena knew exactly what she was doing. Our parents were respected doctors in the community. Reputation was everything. Even the whisper of an abuse allegation, even if it was false, could destroy their careers, their standing, their entire lives. The realization of just how far Lena was willing to go left them shaken. She could see it too, the fear settling into their faces. Lena didn't stop there. She threatened to go to the police, to fabricate a story that would paint them as monsters. My parents, who had spent years protecting her, were now trapped, terrified of their own daughter. And when she found out that they were talking to me regularly now, that I was the one they turned to for help, she snapped. She shattered dishes, broke furniture, stormed around the house like a hurricane of rage. And in her ongoing efforts to control them, she started stealing their car keys, ensuring they couldn't leave without her permission. My parents, the very people who had once treated Lena like the center of their universe, were now living in a nightmare of their own making. And for the first time, they finally understood what it felt like to be powerless against her. Things kept getting worse. Every night, my mother called me in tears. Lena had turned their home into a battleground. She controlled their movements by hiding their car keys, making it difficult for them to even get to work. When my mother, exhausted after a long shift, refused to cook for her, Lena exploded, throwing a tantrum, smashing furniture, and blasting music so loud they couldn't sleep. I had wanted my parents to see Lena for who she really was. Now, I was terrified for them. I urged them to seek legal help before things escalated further. But it was already too late. Lena was arrested. It happened one night during yet another explosive argument. This time, she grabbed a knife. My parents, finally recognizing the danger they were in, called the police. Officers arrived swiftly and took her into custody on charges of assault. And just like that, Lena's reign of terror crumbled. With her out of the house, my parents took immediate legal action. They consulted a lawyer, who advised them to file for a formal eviction. They didn't want to press charges, they just wanted her gone. Once Lena was bailed out, they handed her a legal notice, giving her a deadline to move out. It was official, binding. If she didn't leave voluntarily, they had the legal right to force her out. The process was painful. My parents were devastated at the reality of taking their own daughter to court. But they had no other choice. The court sided with them. Lena had 1 week to vacate. If she didn't, law enforcement would remove her. For the first time in years, my parents could finally see a future without living in fear. A future where their home belonged to them again. And through it all, I stayed in touch. Because despite everything, they were still my parents. And now, they finally understood what it had been like for me all those years. After everything, I knew my parents needed time to decompress. They'd been through so much with Lena, and the tension had drained them. So, I invited them to come stay with me in San Francisco for a while. I thought it would be a perfect chance for them to unwind, take a break from the chaos, and get a fresh perspective. Plus, it would give us a chance to connect and heal some of the wounds that had built up over the years. Update 3. I've received countless comments on my post, and I've been reading through them carefully. A lot of you have suggested that Lena might have underlying mental health issues, and it's something we've considered. However, as she's an adult, we can't force her into therapy or a mental evaluation. After everything that's happened, we don't want to make things worse by pushing her into something that could escalate further. The situation has been tough. Since my last update, my parents have spent a few days with me in San Francisco, trying to find some peace after everything. Yesterday, while we were all gathered around the table in my apartment, something shifted. My parents opened up to me, their voices soft with regret. They admitted that they'd been blind to Lena's true nature for years, and they asked for my forgiveness. My father was the first to speak, his voice shaky as he expressed his sorrow for not listening to me sooner. He said they never expected Lena to turn out the way she did, and they couldn't see past her charm. My mother's voice cracked as she echoed his words, acknowledging that they'd failed me by constantly favoring Lena. It was painful to hear, but in a way, it was also what I'd always wanted, an acknowledgement of what I had endured. They shared the hurt of realizing how much they missed, and it was clear that they understood the weight of their mistakes now. I told them I appreciated them taking that first step in apologizing. I shared some of the hardest memories with them, moments of torment I had to endure because of Lena's behavior. My parents sat in stunned silence, truly understanding for the first time the full extent of my pain. They spoke about how their deep attachment to Lena, their miracle baby, clouded their judgment. Their grief from losing the pregnancy before her birth had shaped how they viewed her, and they admitted they'd been blind to her manipulation. It was bittersweet. While I'd wanted this for years, hearing it come from them felt like both a relief and a burden. It wasn't the ideal way to heal our relationship, but it was a crucial turning point. For the first time, we all faced the truth of our broken family dynamic. I told them that regaining my trust would take time, but we agreed to work through things slowly. For now, I'm focused on spending quality time with them while they're here, taking small steps toward rebuilding our bond. Update 4. As the days went by, we took full advantage of the time we had together. We explored San Francisco, enjoying leisurely walks through the vibrant streets, visiting cafes, and soaking up the sights. It was a much-needed break, and I think it's giving us the chance to reconnect, bit by bit. The road ahead will be long, but this time, it feels like we're moving in the right direction. We've been spending our days in San Francisco, enjoying simple meals and savoring each other's company. It's been an emotional journey to reconnect, slowly rebuilding the bonds that had been strained for so long by years of favoritism and denial. As we've spent more time together, I've realized that their decision to seek refuge with me wasn't just about getting away from Lena. It was about trying to rebuild the family they almost lost. We all needed a fresh start, and I think we're finally taking the first steps toward it. We've talked a lot about what to do with Lena. Right now, she's staying at one of her friends' homes, but we can't just cut ties with her. Despite everything that's happened, my parents still feel an overwhelming responsibility towards her. They know what she's done is unforgivable, but they also realize that her behavior might not just be about acting out, it could be a symptom of something deeper. We've come to the decision that we should consider a mental health evaluation, but we can't force Lena to seek help. Since she's an adult, it's up to her whether she wants to address her issues. My parents plan to reach out to her when they return home, hoping she'll be open to having a conversation. Personally, I'm not ready to contact her yet. There's still too much unresolved between us, and I don't want to escalate things further, especially considering how deeply angry she still is with me. For now, I've encouraged my parents to meet with Lena in a public place. Given her history of violent outbursts, I think it's better to have a neutral environment where she's less likely to lash out. Our goal is to help Lena see things from our perspective, not to blame her, but to help her understand how much we care about her and how concerned we are. This isn't about pointing fingers. It's about bringing the family together, facing the painful truths, and hopefully finding a way forward.